Hey, it's Toina. I want to welcome you tonight as we discuss bearing false witness. There's a lot going on in the world today, and it's not just the US, but it truly is the entire world. And one of the things that has been really weighing on me is this concept of people bearing false witness. And so, what we're really going to talk about is what that looks like. What does it mean for someone to bear false witness? And what does it mean when you become a person who starts to believe that false witness? Because there are some of you who are toiling with whether or not what you're seeing is real. You're not sure who to believe or where God stands in all of this. And there's a lot to be said about that. I want to give you a deeper understanding of this. So, what do you say we get started and we get moving today? I want to start off by talking about what God actually hates. And the reason we're going to talk about the abominations is because while there is sin in the world, while there is sin everywhere on this earth, there are specific things that when God calls them an abomination, I want you to think of them as unforgivable. Now, I'm not telling you that they are unforgivable sins, but they are close to that level of atrocity to the Father. So let's start in Proverbs chapter 6, verse 16. There are 6 things the Lord hates. No, 7 things he detests: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that killed the innocent. Let's stop right there for a minute because I want you to understand what haughty eyes means. Haughty is an odd word. It's not a word that we use on a regular basis at this point, but I want to explain to you what haughty is. It is the worst type of pride that a person can have. Haughtiness allows a person to feel like they have superiority over another for whatever illogical reason they have for why they think they are better than others based on the type of hair you have, your gender, your color, any reason at all that they have for thinking that they are better than you. That's haughtiness. Now, let me explain to you why pride is such an abomination in the eyes of our Father. There is nothing on this earth that we create. All we have the capability of doing is manipulating things that have already been created. To be a follower and a believer in the Father, there are certain things that we just don't do. We never think more of ourselves than we ought to because we already know our mistakes. We know we're fallible. We know the areas of our life where we make bad choices. That's just a fact. It's impossible to be haughty when you already know you're fallible, when you know you're not perfect, when you know that people get on your nerves, when you know all the little secrets about you. That's how we know we are not perfect. And that's how we stay out of that realm of haughtiness. But what we're talking about right now are people who don't get that. They refuse to accept that they err, that they make mistakes. They sit back and they think there's nobody as good as me. Well, the problem is at the moment you think that, now their truth becomes there's nobody who is worse than you. And we often miss that. It's always the inverse. A friend of mine likes to say that pretty regularly. The inverse is always true. If you think you all that in a bag of chips, I promise you, you are nothing. It's a miserable truth, but it's a truth nonetheless. Let's move to the next slide. A heart that plots evil, feet that race to do wrong. Most people don't understand that people actually run to do things that are wrong. When you look at gang members, regardless of color, plot and run to do evil quickly. For example, in Springfield, Ohio, currently, they are having a problem with the Klan rising up and threatening people because of some things in the world that were said. They knew better, but they didn't want to acknowledge that. So they were quick to go out there and start trouble. That's what that verse is talking about. It's when you take advantage of a situation so that you can go and be evil, that you can put people in a situation and create hardships for them in their life. Let's do 19. A false witness who pours out lies, a person who sows discord in a family. There's nothing worse than bearing false witness. And you see that a lot when you see these young ladies who go out of their way to accuse men falsely of doing inappropriate things with them. It happens a lot, but it is one of the 7 abominations that God absolutely hates, things that he holds tightly and does not forget. You see, we often think that God's justice is unjust, but his justice is perfect. And the thing that we hate about it is this: while he will forgive us for things, he says, I put it as far away from me as the east is from the west. He does, but he still has a book. And there are still natural consequences that come with everything. You know, in a previous conversation that we had, we talked about David and how when he sinned with Bathsheba, the baby died. You know what we didn't talk about? Were all the things that happened while he was lying on his deathbed. His eldest son had already tried to lay claim to the kingdom, but the kingdom was not his. When he found out he didn't get it, he repaid his father by fornicating with his concubines in his roof. He did all manners of evil against his father, and all of that stemmed from what he had done all those years ago when he killed Uriah. You see, just because God forgives us doesn't mean that the punishment isn't still there. The decisions that we make on this earth impact how we experience life on this earth. And that's the thing that we don't look at. We don't look at what we do that causes the problems. You know, recently an associate of mine sent their child off with some people, but they didn't really know these people. And the family that went with them was in some type of an accident, okay? And her child was hurt. And she broke down with how could God let this happen? Okay. I want you to think about something. God didn't make the choice to put that young lady in a car with people they didn't know. They didn't know how these people drove. They didn't know their level of responsibility. They knew nothing about these people. How can you be angry at God when you chose not to handle the situation like a grown-up would? But see, that's the stuff that we do. That's what happens and how we fall prey to reprobate minds. When we choose not to be responsible, there's only one other thing we can be, and that's irresponsible. Everything in this world works in twos. You're either one or you're the other, but there's no middle ground. No matter how you try to convince yourself there's no middle ground. So, I want to take you to Proverbs 19:9. A false witness will not go unpunished, and a liar will be destroyed. You see, anytime somebody chooses to bear false witness, there is a price that will be paid. It doesn't matter if it takes 20 years, the price is going to be paid. And we often forget that. And so as we walk around right now and we look at these people who are saying these things that are atrocious and that are hard, you know, the saddest thing is this. If you were lying dying and someone with dark skin was the only person who came along and could save you, most of you would want to be saved. Wouldn't matter what they look like. Well, if that be the case, what value is there to spending your life fighting against your fellow man? What would make you waste your time? Do you think so highly of yourself that you genuinely believe you're better than others? And let me ask you this. If whatever it is that makes you think you're higher was suddenly snatched away from you in the blink of an eye and not easy to get back, would you still feel the same way? There's a lot you've got to ask yourself to really understand who you are and why you allow yourself to think the way that you do. You know, let's go back to that slide for just a second. And a liar will be destroyed. I want to make something very clear for you right now. Not every relationship has a secret. Secrets are lies. That's what they are. And when you choose to hold information back, call it a secret. Oh, it's just a secret. Let me tell you an acceptable secret. Your birthday is coming up and I'm planning a surprise for you. I'm not going to tell you about it. Period. End of subject. Now, that becomes a lie when I know you hate surprises and I do it for you anyway. Lies destroy. They destroy. When you don't tell the truth from the beginning, they destroy. I want to tell you a story about someone I once knew. This gentleman had lived a wild life, and while we live in a world where men are not often ridiculed for how wild they were, he didn't really appreciate who he was. And so here's what he did. When he started having children of their own and they reached a certain age, he didn't have any problem sharing experiences he had had during his youth and his childhood with his children. He told them about some of the things that he did. You know the irony of that? When wicked family members that he had showed up out of nowhere and decided to tell these atrocious stories in ways that came across significantly worse than what really happened, his children already knew the story. And so they were able to correct the individuals as they told the falsified version of the tale. And it ended up resulting in them having less respect for the outside member than they did for their dad. It was a phenomenal experience, but it was because he chose to be honest with them. Quit keeping secrets in your household. Secrets are always a lie. And if you have them, then you do not love your family, because what you're doing is you're setting them up for failure. I want to tell you one other story. I had a client once and she found out she was pregnant. When she found out she was pregnant, she was in her mid to late 20s. And all the people in her family kept telling her to abort, and she decided she wasn't going to. She was going to keep the baby. When the baby finally came, the woman was taking care, she was a single parent. She was taking care of this baby. At some point, she went into a postpartum depression. And the thoughts in her mind about how horrible of a job she was doing were so loud that she couldn't make different choices. So she sent the baby to live with another family member. That family member spent years poisoning this child. And when it was finally time for him to come home, that same family member took her to court and did everything she could to delay the process. For 5 years, that child received horrific damage that left him in a position that made it very hard for him to move forward. When God tells you that an abomination in his eyes is someone who sows discord, that was discord. It was lies. And so she, being a woman of wisdom, shared stories with her child about what, I believe it was a son, with her son, about what had actually happened when she was pregnant. You know, you're these are all people who wanted me to abort you. You just need to understand that it wasn't me who wanted to abort you. Abortion was legal at that time. I knew you were coming and I knew what you were. And those were the things that she would tell him. You know, you always were wanted. There was never a time, despite 39 weeks of morning sickness, that you were not desired. In time, the boy began to see the truth. There was a lot of damage that had to be overcome because of the lies, because of the discord that was sowed. What you have to understand is that the lies that are being sown into this society today are all about division. And what it's doing is it's doing God's work. It's creating a division between people. You see, when you work to live in a town that looks one way and one way only, that's a person who has haughty eyes, who believes that their way of life is the right way. But the fact of the matter is that what you're doing is you're isolating yourself from truth. You're isolating yourself from reality, and you're preventing your life from being enriched by the experiences and opportunities that other people can bring. You're costing yourself. It's an awful thing that we do to ourselves. Are there bad people in the world? Of course there are. You're not always going to be friends with everybody, but you also don't have to shut yourself off from everybody. And that's a lot of times what happens. I want to show you Romans 1:29 because it will really help you understand how your choice to isolate yourself creates a very limited understanding for you and those around you. Remember Romans 1:28, where God turned them over to a reprobate mind. And so it tells you their lives became full of every kind of wickedness, sin, greed, hate, envy, murder, quarreling, deception, malicious behavior, and gossip. Anything that cannot be proven is gossip. And you need to understand that. Something that God hates is when we allow ourselves to become entangled in gossip of any sort. Keep yourself separate and pure and whole so that you can keep your mind right. You can keep a balanced view and surround yourself with people who are willing to help you balance that view. They are backstabbers, haters of God, insolent, proud, and boastful. They invent new ways of sinning and they disobey their parents. Sound familiar? 31. They refuse to understand, break their promises, are heartless, and have no mercy. This is who you become when your mind is gone, when you have given yourself over to craziness and psychosis, when you allow yourself to believe people you know are liars. Anybody who chooses to have an affair on their spouse and then, when they get caught, blames the spouse for catching them is no one who's worth listening to. And that you would open your ear to hear that is what then turns you over to a reprobate mind. You forgot the truth and you allowed yourself to be inundated with nonsense. Let's look at number 32. They know, not they might get it, not perhaps, they know. God's justice requires that those who do these things deserve to die, yet they do them anyway. Worse yet, they encourage others to do them too. What do you think is happening in the political system right now? You're being encouraged to do all types of evil, to believe all types of craziness by people who have proven track records of never being honest. And then you wonder how your mind became reprobate? How could you so quickly forget who these people actually were in real life? Finally, I want to remind you of something. And we're going to go to Matthew 13:58 for this. And he did not many mighty works there because of their unbelief. Let me translate that to you because I often hate double negatives. And he could do no miracles because of their unbelief. Let me tell you what happens when you become reprobate in your mind. You lose hope. You stop believing that which is true. So let's wrap this up so that we can summarize this. The danger of bearing false witness. Number one, bearing false witness will end your life very quickly. God doesn't put up with that. You don't get to go around and deliberately poison people against other people and think that that's all you're going to do, that there's no price to be paid for that. That when people bear false witness, their only goal is to satisfy a personal need. It's not to make you better. It's to make sure that you're controllable. You're allowing yourself to be manipulated. It makes you the sheep. And that's the hardest thing to understand. And there are a lot of people out there who are sold out for the person who lies. And that's something that causes me great concern. Number two, people who bear false witness are an abomination in the eyes of the Father. They are a direct enemy to him. When you choose to lie, you will never see the kingdom of heaven, and you can find that in Galatians. You're an enemy to the Father. Why would you want to be on the wrong side? Now, what happens when you are a person who listens to this? Number one, you become a reprobate mind. Well, the false witnesses, the people who bear false witness also are in a reprobate mind. But as the recipient of this and believer of this, you enter into a reprobate mind. You're a hater. You're proud. You're boastful. All the things that they talk about in the Bible are things that you struggle with. You hate your brother. Remember what I always tell you. You cannot love God whom you cannot see and hate your brother whom you can. And if you believe that, then you are one who has turned away from the Father. And therefore, you need to be fearful that your mind has been reprobated. Now, for most of you who will terrify yourself and think, oh my God, I have a reprobate mind. More than likely you don't, or you wouldn't be asking that question. Finally, why doesn't Jesus do more miracles? Jesus does miracles every minute of every day. Why are there certain areas where he won't? Does it mean his power is limited? Absolutely not. You see, Jesus doesn't do miracles where it's going to cost people their ability to hang in there. He lets them go. And I want you to understand that. If you want to see more miracles from the Father, then be willing to listen. be willing to follow. I'll see you next week. If you like this video, hit the like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. So that way you will know every time we release a new video.